Hey guys, this is Todd Chapman. I've put together this demo to show some examples of what can be done with my keyboard system. This video won't get into any detail as far as showing how to set up the software and how to program the software and keyboard, etc. It's mainly just to show examples of what can be done with it. Also keep in mind, this keyboard is my first prototype. The size and shape and the button layout are the final layout, but the plastic and the LEDs and the color that is shining through the keyboard, that's still being worked on. So the next couple of revisions of that, you'll see some improvement in terms of seeing the color and the LED shine up on the surface. Okay, thanks for checking it out. Okay, I'm going to show some examples using the software and the keyboard in conjunction with Pro Tools 10. So first thing I'll do is I'll open up a preset, and I've got a preset here. Okay, so I'm going to take some examples that are in my Pro Tools Mix View bank. Over here on the screen, you can see that I've got a left, right, up, and down navigation set of buttons. Left and right here correspond to left and right here, and up and down here on the navigation section of the keyboard. Alright, so let's start with some examples using these buttons here. Normally in Pro Tools, if you're in a mix view, if you want to move around to a different track, you would scroll around with the mouse on the scroll bar at the bottom. On my system, you don't use the scroll bars anymore. You move around with navigation. So let's take this for example. Far left is track 1. I've just named these tracks in groups of 20 so for our demo purposes. So I'm going to move to the right 20 tracks. One click and we've moved over 20 tracks. Another click, we've moved over to track 41, 61, 81, and that's as far as it can go. We've got a total of 120 tracks in this session, and to keep everything organized, I want to have always 120 tracks in this session. So if you have more tracks than that, we can deal with that later. This is just a demo, and we want to have everything grouped together in increments so that we have a nice even number of ways to move around. So that's an example of these buttons moving around on the screen. Okay, in a similar way to how we were scrolling left and right in the mix view, I'm going to show you how we will scroll vertically in the edit view. So I'm going to take these two buttons, the vertical buttons, and they correspond to vertical buttons here in the navigation section of the keyboard. Let's click over to Pro Tools Edit View, scroll down, and we just scroll down 18 tracks because what is visible on the screen is 18 tracks at a time in the scale that I've got it set to, which is small, I think. So scroll down another 18, another 18, another 18, etc. So we move up and down in groups like that. Now we can scroll any amount that we want to. We could scroll one track at a time or 2 or 4. It's easy to change that. I'm just scrolling the entire view. Alright, so that's one example of scrolling up and down in edit view. Now we can also scroll, or not scroll, I should say zoom in or out. So I've got two buttons here set up for zooming in and out. Okay, go to where do you want to go, scroll down to where you want to scroll down to, and then zoom in or out with these buttons. Okay, now I've got some buttons here set up to move the cursor or move the line in increments. So these two are set to move one bar at a time, one bar left, one bar right, 5 bars left, 5 bars right. You can set that however you want, but if you look at the line on the screen, you can see I'm moving at 1 bar increments. Now I'm moving 5 increments, 5 bar increments. All right, so that way you can rapidly get to the end of the song if you want to move around. Okay, zoom out, zoom in. Okay, all right, here's an example of a one-click save and bump the revision number of your song. Normally in Pro Tools, if you wanted to save a song, you would click Save As, and you would go to your revision number, and you would manually type in the new number and then click Save. On this system, you just click one button, and it will open up the dialog and increment the number 1 digit or 1 decimal and save it automatically. So it's one click, bump, and save. And you can see up here on my song name at the top of the screen, watch the number change. It's 600, now it's 601, now it's 602. That's an example of creating a list of commands that will extract the number, increment the number, replace the number in the file name, and save it. Alright, here are a few features that won't make a lot of sense right now, but later on they're valuable tools that can help you out. I've got a button set up for get mouse position. So whenever I click this button, wherever I move the mouse to, you can see that it is updating the X position on the screen and the Y position on the screen wherever the mouse is. If I move it over here, you can see the Y is at 560. If I bring the mouse down, the Y is at 699, 823, etc. Top left hand corner is 00. The bottom right hand corner of the screen is 1919 by 1078, which is my screen resolution. So that's a valuable tool later. We'll get to that when we get into some more advanced examples. Okay, there's also a feature called get pixel color. So wherever I put the mouse, the tip of the mouse, and press this button, get pixel color, you can see that the color that was found is green. Go down here, and the color was found was blue, orange, etc. This is used later when we want to find out if our screen is actually on the screen that we want it to be before we take an action. So we'll get into this a little bit later, but as you can see, wherever I'm clicking on, it is showing you the RGB colors here. Red is 0, green is 249, blue is 0, and those are useful later on when we want to start finding out, is the screen on the screen that we want it to be on before we even do anything. Alright, here are some of your just basic Pro Tools editing tools. I've got, not that you can't use your F keys for this, but once you get used to using the buttons, sometimes it's nice just to have one type of tactile feel for your command. So here's your magnifying glass, end tool, line tool, hand tool. Okay, just your standard moving around from tool to tool. Let's say, for example, you have double click this and you want to change the name, and then you change your mind. I've got this set up as a cancel, so you can set up very simple Mac commands. So I'll just cancel that window. Alright, let's say that I want to put a fade on here. It's got that set up as a fade. So very simple. Your basic Pro Tools functions can be set up on a button just like you have on your function keys. Okay, a couple more simple examples here. Let's say I've highlighted this section and I want to copy it and paste it. Instead of doing the Command C and Command V, you could just easily press one button for copy, one button for paste, just like that. And let's say we want to trim this section out. I can have one button for selection trim. Let's say that I want to undo everything. Instead of Apples or Command Z, I can press one button and undo. Okay, a couple more simple examples. Let's do split region. Let's do trim end. Okay, and let's do deselect all regions. So let's say we've got a whole lot of things selected. Just press one button to deselect if we want to. Alright, here's a feature to have one button set to flip between grid or slip. Okay, and let's go to the mix window. Here's a button to create a new group and cancel that. Let's disable all groups, or disable the group that the mouse is currently over, and we can actually automate the mouse to move to that specific group if we wanted to. So we could have a button that would move to a specific group and disable it. Okay, here's a mode that I've got set up where you could have all 20 buttons on the bottom row be set up to act as solos for tracks 1 through 20. The top row could be set up to be mutes for tracks 1 through 20, and then you can scroll left or right, so you could have 1 through 20, 21 through 40, 41 through 60, etc. So I'll show you that right now. Our first track is a master and it doesn't have a solo or mute, so I'll start with number 2. So you can see I can solo. Those are groups, that's why they're all lighting up. And then we would have mutes here, okay, all the way down to track 20. And then we could come back, we could flip to tracks 21 through 41. So you can see we're at 21 now, and do the same thing. So we could use it sort of like a mixing console. It's a nice way to be able to go through and solo a lot of tracks on the fly like that. Okay, so a lot of what we've seen up to this point, a lot of this has just been pretty standard stuff, just assigning hotkeys or quick keys to your basic Pro Tools functionality. So I'm going to show you some stuff here. It's a little bit more advanced. If you look at this button here, which is this button here on the keyboard, you can see that there are 1, 2, 3, almost 15 items in this list that are going to take place. So this is where the keyboard starts taking on a role of programmable logic, where I've programmed some logical functions to take place on one button to do more complicated tasks. Okay, so in this example, this button is going to move to the left in our track list. This is going to move to the right in our track list. And what I mean by track list, I have a window called a track list, which you can enter in all of the tracks that you want to for your session. You could put in a couple of tracks, or you can put in all of the tracks in the entire song. You can then send a track from the main track list into a favorites list. So you really have 2 lists. You have a column for every track that you've entered into the track list, and then you've got a column for every favorite. And then within the favorites list, you are able to select and deselect which favorite item you want to work with at any given times, and so you could change those on the fly. So for now, I've got lead, which is track 2, selected as a favorite, and I've got just a dummy track named 88 selected as a favorite. Okay, and then over here we have 1, 2, 3, 4. We have about 7 tracks in our main list. So let's close out of here, go back to the mix window, and I'm going to press to the left. So we're already to the hard left, so you can see we're on lead. Now we're on lead 2. We're on backs. We are on track 22, 42, 65, and 88, like you saw in the track list. We can go back down with this button. Okay. Now these buttons are assigned to just moving up and down the track. Now I've got these 2 buttons assigned to moving up and down the favorite. So let's say you've got a favorite that's in the low numbers, in the, say 1, 2, or 3 tracks, and you've got a favorite that's up in the high numbers of your tracks. So instead of having to scroll back and forth with your mouse on the scroll bar, just click 1 click to the left and you're on your lead, which was our favorite, one of our 2 favorites we had selected. Then click the favorite to the right, and now you can see the mouse is on track 88. So you can bounce back and forth between your favorites really quickly. So let's say I want to switch this and make this become a couple of different other favorites. So let's go select lead 2 and track 42 as our favorite for now. Okay, scroll back over here. Okay, now you can see we're on 42 and we're on lead 2. 42 and lead 2. We can bounce back and forth between favorites really quickly this way. Here's an example of using one button to expand your track show hide and groups little side panel. Okay, here's an example of setting up a button to move to a specific track. So I've got set track number 1 here. This button is going to go to track 21. This button will go to 41. And this button will go to 61. So let's say you've got a commonly used track like a lead vocal, and you know you're going to go there 1,000 times during the duration of your mix or recording process. You could just go ahead and set up a couple of your main tracks on a button if you wanted to. So here's an example. Press button number 1, it goes to track 1, and not only does it go to the track, it actually puts the mouse on the center of the fader so it's ready to move it. Next track, track 21, track 41, track 61, and you can see that every one of those faders has a different level, but the cursor is finding the center line of the fader when it moves to it. Alright, here's an example of opening up a plugin with a button and dragging that plugin to a specific location. Then I can hide all the plugins with your standard, hide and show plugins feature. Okay, in the previous example we had set up these buttons 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to open up plugins A, B, C, D, and E on a channel for, in this case, an example of lead vocal 2. And we opened up these plugins here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if you'll notice, if I open them up individually, they all go to the same location every time. So what I've done is I've created a method to take the plugin and drag it, not only open it, but drag it to a location. So it opens it up, takes it, and puts it in a specific location. All right, so we can hide that plugin. Now I've also set up a button to open up all plugins in one click. So in this case, you can see it takes each of the 5 plugins, A, B, C, D, and E, opens the plugin up and drags it to a specific location on your screen. And where it drags it to, that's up to you. You can choose where it's going to show up on the screen. Okay, so then we can hide all plugins, put them all back, but we can also have individual access, so we can open up any one plugin at the time that we want to. Okay. All right, here's an example of creating a marker. I'll create a marker here. I'll go plus. I'll name this marker test. You can see the marker blinking here. I will take this marker and put it on auto tune plugin here. Okay, let me actually make that marker small. Let's make it a mini. Okay, all right, so I've given that marker an idea of, let's say 100. Okay, now I'm going to mouse move to marker by ID of 100. I'm going to do a mouse click. All right, so we've got this button assigned here. Let's click this button. Oh, the marker's still up. Let me get rid of it. Hide all markers. There we go. Okay, so now what I'm doing is I'm pressing one button. The mouse is moving to the marker at the position we put the marker on the auto tune plugin. Okay, so that's an example of placing a marker on the screen, making the mouse move to it. Here's an example of using the roller in conjunction with 5 buttons to set the fader resolution. So you have low resolution all the way up to high resolution. Okay, let's start with low resolution. Next, next, next. And then this is like super tweaker mode, so you could actually go down and work in increments of 0.3 or so. All right, here's an example of using the track list. I've got a list of tracks that I entered here in the left side, and I put some of those tracks over into the right hand side in the favorites list. Okay, and I selected lead as an active favorite, and I selected track 88 as an active favorite. Okay, now I'm going over here to Pro Tools screen. I will click favorite down, and it puts the mouse on the lead track, favorites up, and it puts it on track 88, and it put the mouse cursor directly on the fader. Back down to lead, and when I touch the roller, you can see that I'm going to roll this one all the way up to the top. Okay, let's go to 88. I'll roll this all the way down to the bottom. Now watch this. Go back to 1. The mouse is automatically on the fader. I'll roll it down, go back to 88, finds the fader, and I roll it up. Back and forth. Track 2, track 88. Okay, now watch this. Let's switch to favorites. Let's say track 3 and track 4. All right, leads and backs. Leads and backs. I'm going to ride the backs. Go over here, I want to ride the lead. I want to ride the backs. There you go. Okay, here's an example of using a button to move to the next track to the right and a button to move to the next track to the left. So if you wanted to quickly and easily move from one track to the next without having to use your mouse, this is an easy way to do it. Likewise, whatever track you're on, you can have a button assigned to mute that track or to solo that track. So if we're on this track, we could mute it, and it doesn't matter whether I move the mouse to the track or trackball, whatever you're using, or whether I use the left or right track navigation buttons. It doesn't matter. You can press solo or mute. If you're on a track that is an audio track, you can also have a record enable button assigned, so you can scroll around and select tracks to record on. Along the same lines of having a button for record, solo, or mute, I've also set up a method to pan the pan knob straight up, hard left, or hard right, so you could rapidly make your changes. Now these could be positioned wherever you want. If you want them at 9 and 3, if you want them at 2 and 10, wherever you want to do it. I just used an example of, for example, of recording a background vocal where you may cut a vocal straight up, but then you rapidly move it to the left, and then record another one and rapidly move it to the right. So it's just a fast way to pan your tracks. Alright guys, that's going to do it for this example video. Stay tuned. I'll have other demos that do a lot more examples, and I'll have other tutorials and explanations of how to actually use the software, how to program it, how to set up your own buttons. These buttons are just an accumulation of some that I've put together for the purposes of sort of getting the software written and sorted out. So this is only really the beginning in terms of things we can do with the software. So stay tuned, leave me some notes, suggestions, or requests for examples, and I'll try to get them incorporated. Okay, thanks a lot.